All right, welcome back to the Pick Six Podcast, Tuesdays with Brady. We're going to play a little game, and it's called Fatal Flaws. Bom, bom, bom. We're going to take the best teams in the NFL and find their fatal flaw. And I think that's actually kind of interesting because you see, you can always kind of like look at, like, I guess maybe the Patriots were the exception. I was trying to think of like what the Patriots' fatal flaw always was when they were winning every year. They just didn't have one.
I don't know about that.
Sometimes they wouldn't have a vertical threat.
Sometimes you win despite that. So
yeah,
that's right.
Here's the thing: is like I think we'd all agree: is San Francisco not the best team in the NFL right now?
Yeah, for
I
sure.
don't think that's up for debate.
So it's hard to look at their roster and say like, all right, what's their weak point? Because anything we say, someone here at CBS is going to clip this off and try to make it go viral. Like, oh, this is what they're hating. So that's the hard part about doing an activity like this.
Well,
Like,
did you see your boy Dan Orlovsky over at ESPN? So Dan did a thing. He was on Get Up. Oh, actually, I guess I got rid of the exclamation point. So he was on Get Up.
Greeny right there.
Well, they it used to be Get Up exclamation point, which is just like unnecessary. It's like,
but now what is it?
well, now it's just Get Up and just there's no.
Yeah, it's Get Up.
Right.
Right.
There's no energy behind it.
but I don't want a 6 a.m. show being like, get up. Like, just be like, hey, get up. Like,
that's the alarm clock you don't want. You know, you got to change on your phone or change on your alarm clock.
I like to think that that me like making fun of that for like years has helped to change the punctuation.
I would love to do a voice note and record me yelling, get up, like, and then have you wake up to that every single day of your life.
That would be amazing.
Oh, God, welcome to hell. But anyway, Dan pointed out, he said on Get Up that he's like, Max,
is he going to say the cornerback play? Because that's the only thing you look at and say.
No. He was talking about Brock Purdy. He was like, Mac Jones would be doing the same things in San Francisco that Brock Purdy's doing. George Kittle goes on KNBR and they ask him, like, did you hear what he said? He goes, yeah, that's stupid. Watch Brock Purdy, watch the tape. And then like last night. But then last night, Dan comes out with a breakdown of like why Brock Purdy's awesome, which I think is just like fun. I don't know. I found it amusing.
Look, we always love to debate hypotheticals because, you know, we can prove this in real time, right? Like Mac Jones eventually no, it's never going to happen. Look, by saying that Mac Jones would excel in Kyle Shanahan's offense is not a knock on Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Like we can say that, right? Like it's okay to say that. Like it's okay to say, like, for example, I was asked this week, would Dak Prescott excel with the San Francisco 49ers offense? Yes. Like, that's not a knock on Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's been phenomenal, and he deserves to be in the MVP consideration. But I also don't want to take away from what's around him, too, and what guys like George Kittle and Juszczyk and Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey and the offensive line, everyone, Kyle Shannon's play calling. Like, that's all part of the formula. Like, we always get too much praise as quarterbacks for our success, and the reality is it's a sum of all the parts. We're just kind of the guy to help kind of keep it all together and execute it, right?
Yeah.
So
what's the fatal flaw for the 49ers?
I don't know if there is a fatal flaw. I mean, like
literally
the one thing you'd say is, all right, Brock Purdy doesn't have a lot of experience or even postseason experience. So maybe you'd say like they're going to get there. When they do get there, does that matter? I don't know, right? I don't have any postseason experience, so it's not like I can speak to them in that regard.
Yeah.
I think their cornerbacks, if you look at their roster and how talented they are, that's probably an area where you say, like, all right, if you're facing a team, for example, like the Eagles, who do have really talented wide receivers and A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and speed on the outside, that's going to be a tough matchup for them to match up with consistently man-to-man. That's the only thing that you'd say, like, all right, like, could you see Philly having success there in those one-on-one matchups? Sure. But I also think the 49ers pass rush and their coverage so far has been phenomenal. So I'd have to see that before I believe it right now. And that's kind of where we're at. Like Philly and San Francisco are by far and away the best two teams. It'd be a fun matchup to watch.
Yeah, when I look at that, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is a weird game to play because we're 5 weeks into the season, and I'm not trying to suggest that this is the case, but is it possible the Niners haven't played? I mean, the Niners are the best team in football, but like they beat Pittsburgh, who's fine. They beat the Rams by a touchdown, and I thought the Rams looked pretty good in that game. I think the Rams are a good team. They beat the Giants, who stink. They beat the Cardinals, who aren't very good, and they stomped the Cowboys, but the Cowboys haven't played anybody either. And like maybe I don't know. Like I mean, I think the Niners are really good, But I don't know that we're like they were at Cleveland, at Minnesota, versus Cincinnati, at Jacksonville. I guess we find out like three of the next 4 on the road. I think we find out like if they're 9-0. I mean, I'm not. Then they played people right like on the road, et cetera, et cetera. I just I don't know that there's like a ton. There's not a ton of great teams right now. 5 weeks into the season, maybe.
I mean, it's just so early in the season to determine like who truly is dominant. But I think we can say that San Francisco, for every test that's been put in front of them,
yeah.
it's the NFL. Like
it's the NFL.
You play who's on the schedule. Like you can lose any week. Like nobody saw the Cardinals beating the Dallas Cowboys, and they beat the brakes off them. So that's just literally the NFL. And as dominant as they were against the Dallas Cowboys, a lot of people were saying this was a litmus test to see, where the Dallas Cowboys were in comparison, especially losing 2 playoff games to them 2 years in a row. They passed that with flying colors. I mean, I know you like a good smoke beef, Brady. We saw the Michael Parsons come out and say, it's personal. Well, not losing 2 playoff games in a row wasn't personal enough. And then Debo responds saying, you might not want to make it any more personal because we beat you 42-10. It might get worse for you.
By the way, did Deion make the whole "it's personal" thing popular now? I feel like before this year,
really
like he's the one who started that at Colorado, and then now like everyone's saying it. They're like, oh, it's personal, or maybe it was the Jordan documentary. But even after the Jordan documentary, there wasn't a lot of people who came out like using that. Now everyone's because Deion's saying they're like, yeah, I took that personal. It's like, oh, okay.
The Jordan doc, like, and I took that personally, definitely like spiked it. Maybe Deion built off of the Jordan doc.
But it didn't like catch on. Now I hear like guys say it all like we took that personal. It's like, all right, cool. Glad you took that. That is personal. I don't know.
Well, it also, by the way, it also throws like in the Pete Briscoe's like, you think they tried harder because he said something? I'm like, I mean, I think that motivated him. I think it like definitely helped. Also, something that Pete Briscoe said on yesterday's show that was incredibly stupid. He said we're like, Pete, like, how concerned are you about Dallas? He's like, what? It's not a big deal. It's one game. They went in and got ambushed. Just what's the problem? It's like.
Ambush.
It's like you think they got ambushed on Sunday Night Football by that's not Pete. Like, do you know what an ambush is?
2 times in a row in the playoffs and knocked you out.
That's the word usage. Like, I'm not sure
exactly.
Is the way of describing what took place on it.
They got baby seal club. They didn't get ambushed.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, ambush implies that like you didn't see something coming, right?
Like you knew what it was when you stepped on that field in the very first play.
It's like Pete, they circled this game as like the biggest game of the season before the season. Like they didn't get ambushed walking into San Francisco after losing the playoffs the last 2 years with the 49ers undefeated and the game on Sunday Night Football, the biggest game of the week, bro.
Yeah, that's wild. But getting back to what we were talking about, Will, you're saying what's their fatal flaw? I know you brought up the corners, but honestly, watching that game film, like they don't major in man coverage, but they did versus the Dallas Cowboys. Well, and they beat them up at the line.
It's not man; it's more of a match zone.
Correct. Yeah,
and that's all I'm saying is like that's the only thing you'd say, but that's being nitpicky. Like, again, like the cornerbacks are good. Yeah. We're doing a segment for the podcast. Yeah. What do you want?
I mean, if anything, I have question marks with their O-line besides Trent Williams, but even they've played really well. Like. So,
over under Joe Musa says over under 42 and a half Yeti products at Prince's house.
How many do you have in the background just looking at it?
I will say this on my desk. I currently have 1, 2.
Oh my goodness.
3 Yeti products right here.
By the way, small cooler back there
coolers,
too.
Shirts.
This has an iced coffee in them. The other 2 had water in them. I left 2 on my desk. So Musso, not wrong. Shout out Yeti. Yeti rules. Moving along, the Buffalo Bills. Speaking of teams that play in Yeti-like conditions.
Injuries.
That was an easy one.
It's actually their fatal flaw will continue to be moving forward.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
it's like when you, and it's not just injuries. It's like to key cogs on their team, right? You talk about Matt Milano, what he means to that defense. This guy's been like a Pro Bowl linebacker for the last 3 or 4 years. He was playing at an all-pro level. The things he can do coverage-wise, the way he diagnoses plays, high football IQ. I mean, you can't replace that. Like Dorian Williams, I love him, kid out of Tulane. I thought that was a perfect team for him to go to. I honestly thought he would be starting next to Matt Milano, learn the system, and eventually be able, those two would be, the forefront of that defense for the next like 5-6 years. But now he's thrust into action a little bit early. And he actually played really well in that game for Jacksonville as far as you saw some of his, speed and coverage. You saw him diagnose plays and get downhill. I think it's still going to be a learning curve because Matt Milano just has that defense down to a T. Talk about losing Tre'Davious White. Kyer Elam was getting cooked on the outside by Calvin Ridley. He was a healthy scratch for a couple games this season. He was a first-round pick. So, I mean, the injury bug has killed him. And Daquan Jones, people aren't talking about that injury. That's a massive injury up front for the Buffalo Bills.
Well, and I think, too, the other thing with the fatal flaw and the injuries, especially on defense, is we all go back and remember 13 seconds, and that's why they've been trying to build this defense to slow down the Chiefs and to stop Patrick Mahomes late in games. And if you don't have bodies out there, it's tough to do. What about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I'm interested that they're being thrown in this mix. I don't think they're quite on the same level, but they are up there in terms of the division and playoff runs.
The record shows they're up there right now.
Record says they're up there. So what's their fatal flaw?
You want me to go? To me, it's their pass rush. They only have 4 sacks throughout the season.
So far.
Now Shaq Barrett is a guy that is consistently get to the edge, but the other guy on the other side, Joe
Tryon,
yeah.
He's struggled ever since being a first-round pick getting to the quarterback. So they need to have some. And Todd Bowles, he likes to blitz a lot, right?
Yeah.
He manufactures pressure, but they've struggled to get to the quarterback consistently. I think that could be an issue for them down the stretch. It might not be in the division they're in because if you look at the offenses they face, the Saints offense has been bad this year. Carolina Panthers has been bad. And we know the Atlanta Falcons like to run the ball, which is the Tampa Bay Bucks strong suit on defense. So it won't hurt them in the division, but if they want to make a run to the playoffs and make a run in the playoffs, they got to figure out how to manufacture more pressure on the quarterback.
They are coming off the bye, so that number should increase over time. I like the front seven. They're great against the run. I think they will get better rushing the passer, and they're good in coverage. I would say if you want to be nitpicky, you could say maybe their running game. That was kind of an issue during the time Tom Brady was there, although maybe by design because he wanted to throw it around a little bit more. But I would say if you're looking at this team right now, and I believe they're atop of the NFC South, or at least some of the picks there.
They are. Saints have 2 losses. So.
You'd have to say that, like, all right, well, they're in the playoffs. And if you're in the playoffs, what do you got to do? You got to be able to run the football. You have to play in some places with inclement weather, and that always becomes part of that game is when the weather dictates how you can play it. You always are going to have the ability to hand off the football. So that would be the one thing that if they can't find that balance, it's going to be an uphill sledding, adverse conditions, potentially on the road, in the playoffs, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Bucks 3-1 at the top of the division. Falcons and Saints 3-2. Obviously, the Panthers are winless. I think it'll be interesting to see. You could even say the fatal flaw is like they're the Buccaneers. I mean, they had an early bye.
Wow!
I'm just saying.
I'm
just saying. The Bucks are 3-1. What's their record after Detroit, Atlanta, at Buffalo on a Thursday, at Houston versus the Titans, and at San Francisco? Yeah.
Ooh, that's a gauntlet.
They could go like 2-4.
Learn about this team in the next 4 weeks, though.
Exactly. I think we'll learn a lot about it. All right, the Philadelphia Eagles also undefeated. What is the Eagles' fatal flaw? Brady or Deuce?
So I went back and forth with this one, Will and Brady. I think it's a combination of 2 things. And I think the first one I'm about to say, I think they've kind of rectified. It was their passing defense, but they did have some injuries. Yeah, coverage in the back end. But let's not forget James Bradbury was hurt. Yeah, Blankenship was hurt in the beginning.
Yep.
They actually played really well last week. So I would take that off. And then you know what helps coverage? Pass rush. We finally see Hassan Reddick, after I believe having that thumb surgery, really come to the party. Jalen Carter's been at the party the whole year. He literally is playing all pro football right now. My fatal flaw for them is just getting the rhythm with their 2 coordinators. Like, people forget they have 2 new coordinators.
Yeah, I'd say the inexperience.
Exactly. So it was going to take a while for Sean Desai and Brian Johnson to really get their feet wet into this game and calling plays. It's a rhythm thing when you call plays. So people question their offense. It doesn't look as explosive. Well, it did Sunday versus the Rams. It looked really good, and they looked really good on defense. So, I mean, just kind of like San Francisco, this is me nitpicking, right? Because I think on paper, I would say them and San Francisco have the most complete teams in all the NFL. So I would say it's the coordinators being able to find that rhythm going forward as they make this run.
Yeah, I'd just describe it more as an experience. I think if you were going to be nitpicky, you'd say probably their secondary.
Yeah.
With some of the changes that have occurred there, and they have faced some injuries, but they're getting healthier. So again, a team that we're trying to make fatal flaws for, but they don't really have any.
Yep. At the Jets this week versus the Dolphins, at Washington, and then versus Dallas before their bye, and then at Kansas City. Oh my gosh! By the way, this is a spike. So, I think that they probably go 3-1 in that stretch. Worst case scenario. They could go 2-2, I guess. But then listen to Philly's out of the bye schedule: at Kansas City versus Buffalo versus San Francisco at Dallas.
Oh my God.
That's like
had a stretch like that.
I mean, Kansas City, Buffalo, and San Francisco are like the other than Philly are the three best teams in football, and they got and maybe Miami. I mean, they got them just back to back to back. So that's kind of interesting, worth watching. Okay, speaking of Miami, the Dolphins playing good football, playing great football. I don't know if you know this, Mike. They have the most yards in the first 5 weeks of the season. Did you hear
ever? Yeah. Over the 2000 Rams,
over the
1999 Rams. Yeah,
99. Sorry,
that's fine. That was my high school graduation year. Very exciting. I
mean, honestly, it's the.
Did you hear Mike McDaniel's answer?
Really?
By the way,
what was his answer?
Our buddy, a friend of the podcast, Adam Beasley, or good buddy Adam Beasley, asked Mike McDaniel about it, and Mike McDaniel goes, mission accomplished. That's what we set out to do all offseason, was to have the most yards in NFL history through 5 weeks. That's what we were worried about. And Andrew Siciliano was talking about it on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and he was like, what a stupid question.
That's so funny.
So, Peace, good job by you, buddy.
Speaking of questions, Coach Franklin from Penn State, did you see that question he got asked?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Did you see it?
I have not seen it.
Fake. Like someone called in to mess with him.
Somebody called him, and I think it was over Zoom or something like that during a press conference, and a reporter asked him, and this is not me downing the reporter, but he asked him, with Drew Eller, is there any time you call a play in, it's just for him to take a shot, no matter what the defense looks at? He was like, Coach Franklin looks at him, he's like, my skin was itching when you asked me that question. He's like, we would never tell a quarterback to just drop back and throw it down deep for no reason, no matter what the coverage is. So I thought that was pretty funny. But you said it's the health of Tua.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that this team operates the same without Tua.
Yeah,
you could probably pick some other things. Yeah. Like I think their offensive line could at times.
They've had some injuries. Yeah,
that could be something you point to. But if he doesn't stay healthy and they don't have him at quarterback, I think this whole thing looks different. We saw that last year. Yeah. I think you'd see it this year too.
To me, that's the obvious one, right? And we've been saying that all offseason, and people get mad. The Tuanon get mad. Why do you keep saying if? I mean, because history has shown he has not been healthy for a whole season, even going back to college. To me, it's the defense, guys. This defense is giving up 27 points a game. We saw in the Buffalo game, right, that, and Josh Allen and them, I think they wanted to make a statement that game as far as, yes, we know Miami is the hot new thing right now, but we've dominated this division for the last 3 years, and they decimated that defense. I know Vic Fangio, we knew it was going to be a learning curve. Obviously, we thought Jalen Ramsey would be there. He's not there right now. They've struggled a little bit in the secondary. Caden Kohu has struggled on the outside. I think they need to move him back in the inside. More so, Cam Smith should get more snaps, I believe, on the outside. And then as far as their pass rush, right, Jalen Phillips has been beat up this year, right? Chubb has not really come to the party as of yet. Van Ginkel is their best player on defense right now. He's playing Pro Bowl football, and I don't think any of us would have said that going into the season, Brady. So I think the learning curve in regards to this Vic Fangio defense and trying to figure things out, because what if there is a game like there was versus Buffalo where the team can't put up 40 points, or Brady, right? What are they going to do then if the defense is giving up 27 points?
Yeah, no, I mean, they got to outscore them, which I think that's kind of how they're built. And look, it's first year with Vic Fangio. They don't have Jalen Ramsey back yet. If you kind of go through those years of Vic Fangio defenses, typically they're locking those guys on the outside out on islands, and then you've got the 9 guys on the inside taking care of the rest. So I'm not as concerned about that. I think it's just really the health of Tua.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, the other thing too, I think it's interesting to note that we have not seen the last quarterback to come back to the last quarterback to suffer a concussion and come back the next week and play was Tua last year, which means if you suffer a concussion, you were out for the next week. Like the NFL is being much more diligent about it. It's a good thing. I mean, even we don't want to judge the level of concussions here, but if Tua suffers a concussion, I feel like just because of what happened last year, it's not a 1 week and he's back type of thing. I think they'll have to be really careful with it. So I think that's you suffer concussion in the wild card game, right? And you're out. You're out for 2 weeks.
When we do this activity, I think the first thing I think of when I think of it's what's the first concern you have with each team? Like what comes to mind?
Yeah, I think a lot of us would have picked the Dolphins to be. I would have way more confidence in the Dolphins being a really, really good football team if I was before the season. If I was confident that Tua would play the whole season. And I think Harry points out in the chat that his jiu-jitsu and the better offensive line has definitely helped. Like I do think like you watch him when he lands, he actually does keep his head up like way better than he did before.
Was he turning it out there?
How do you practice that?
Maybe he should have a neck roll. Like maybe we should think about a way of like pinning it in there.
Full Bosworth?
Quarterback with a neck roll?
No, we're about to. The jiu-jitsu or judo or I mean, what was it?
Which one was it?
By the way, there's a good episode of the Pick Six podcast where we talked to Randy Cross about Steve DeBerg and the voice box he had on there. Did you ever hear that story?
Steve DeBerg came to Cleveland one time, consulted with us. He was like literally talking us into this is all 2008, like talking us into like no look passes. Like he was like, yeah, you gotta practice them though. Like you're gonna look here, but you're gonna throw to that camera, and you're gonna look that one, you're gonna throw to that one, and you're gonna look here and you're gonna throw there. And I was just like, okay, cool.
Turns out he was right.
To a degree, but like then there's certain elements where you see other guys. Like here's the thing: is you only see the no look passes when they work.
Right.
Like I can vividly remember, far as I think the last playoff game with the Vikings, when it was like a simple. I think it was just a Hank concept. Typically, you start over the ball, then you get your curl flat on the outside, whichever way to squeeze you work to. Well, it was one of them where he drops back. He's like, yeah. Woo! And it was like three dudes standing there right over the TV. And I was like, wow, okay, well, that's not good. I think it was versus Arizona.
That's terrible.
I'm not positive.
Oh, yeah, that was the game where there was when Rodgers made it. No, when it was Kurt Warner and Larry, like Kurt Warner's coming out party with Larry Fitz in the playoffs, maybe?
Maybe I can't recall, but I just remember watching that on tape and like, oof.
Yes.
When no look passes go bad.
But I think that's where the Cardinals and the Steelers met in the Super Bowl. But anyway, DeBerg back in the day lost his voice the week of the game. So they installed a speaker inside of his jersey on the back that like projected his voice when he was in the huddle. So he had like a microphone. He was screaming. He was like screaming in the microphone, and then it would blast. They had like a speaker built into, like in the 1970s, a giant, like huge speaker in his jersey. You guys aren't surprised by this, okay? We already talked about the Chiefs' fatal flaw. Let's rip through the rest of these. The Lions. May have solved their fatal flaw with Jameson Williams coming back.
So that was mine. I don't know if you saw it in the rundown. That's why I put it. I think they needed a deep threat element, but him coming back, I mean, didn't play really that well last week, but he's still working his way back. I think that'll open that offense even more for Ben Johnson.
I think it's depth. I think they can't. They have to be healthy if they suffer an injury almost anywhere. Yeah. Maybe with the exception of, I think that Teddy Bridgewater there is backup, right?
Yeah.
Which Teddy can go in and do a good job for him. But I don't
like that answer.
You know what I'm saying? Like Anderson comes back.
The secondary's already got a few hits already.
Yeah.
DJ Gardner-Johnson, Mosley came back and now he's out for the year again. Yeah. And Brian Branch, hasn't played since having that injury the other day. So
I think it's their depth there to me.
I think it's their jerseys. Because they're the Lions. Like if this is like a different team, we'd be like, this team is unbelievable. Like they wear the Lions jerseys.
They're good, man.
I love this Lions team. I was picturing in my head during the football on Sunday. I was like, I could see a Lions Dolphins Super Bowl.
By the way, can we do like a shout out not only to the ownership there in Detroit, but like to all owners in the NFL? This is how you build a franchise.
Yes.
This is how you do it. You build from the inside out and you give it time. Like for all the people who like kind of want to doubt and everything else, we're seeing it all come to fruition, but it's because ownership was patient. They allowed the front office of Dan Campbell and his staff to do what they did with the players they have. And they allowed this thing to grow. They weren't impatient about it, even after suffering some heartbreaking losses and things not going their way. So, like, for the David Teppers out there who once again is meddling with Frank Reich and everyone else, learn to have some patience. This isn't like a hostile takeover where you flip the company and you make it profitable again. It doesn't work like that in a year's time. Like, your quarterly statements aren't always going to look good maybe for a year or two before you then start being profitable. Like, I don't understand why these owners get so micromanaging with their leadership style. It's like, let the football people do the football stuff.
Exactly.
Because you didn't make your money from football.
That's exactly what I was about to bring up. Did Frank Reich teach you how to be a billionaire?
Yeah.
So why would you meddle in football operations? Like, I never got that. You're an owner, you're paying a lot of money, but sometimes you just got to be a silent investor, man.
By the way, what does that
Football
say about how insanely meddling and just how meddling insanely, or how Jim Irsay manages to meddle? That Frank Reich is up there, he's like, Mr. Tepper is really involved day to day, and I really love it. It's like, okay, one, we know you're lying, and two, like if you think he's like, this is actually decent meddling compared to like my old meddling. Like the last meddling was in crazy meddling. This is at least just angry, like billionaire meddling.
But it comes with a sense of ego, especially when you put your name on a business school there at Carnegie Mellon. So obviously you think,
oh no, David, if the Panthers, I mean, they have too many fatal flaws to list, but their biggest fatal flaw is David Tepper right now. That's for freaking sure. I might want to clip and send that one out on social and watch the Panthers fans get lit up. Finally, the Jaguars.
Jaguars.
What is the Jaguars' fatal flaw?
I went with two things.
Oh,
their offensive line.
You only get one. No. You only get to pick one.
Yeah. It's not fatal flaws. This is the Panthers.
There's no S.
Yeah.
They're not the Jaguars.
This is their fatal flaw. Not leaning into Travis enough.
Okay.
To me, like when he has a good game, that's usually when they have a lot of success. We saw it last week versus the Buffalo Bills. And I know you got, the promised one at quarterback. He's got the long hair flowing and everything. But if you just look at the history of them, and even during that playoff run last year, Travis Etienne really started, taking off towards the back end of that season. And in the playoff game versus the Kansas City Chiefs, he essentially almost put the team on his back. So, I think they need to lean into him more. I know you say we don't get two. Offensive line would be my other one, though.
This is going to sound a little bit like a cop-out because I think there's actually a few things, like you said, you can point to. But how I summarize all of that is consistency.
Okay.
This is a team that I just feel like week in and week out,
we don't know who
you don't know what you're going to get, what they're going to be, and whether it's not giving the ETN the ball enough, poor blocking from the interior of the offensive line, the defense not showing up quite as much. I mean, it's hard to get a sense, or even Trevor Lawrence, who hasn't played as consistent. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a nice win this past week, but I think it's just consistency. And maybe that's because they're still a young team. Ridley comes over this year. You're still getting more consistency with him in the system out of him. I mean, it's we saw them last year become a playoff team.
Yeah.
Everyone's expectation is the next step is, Pete, they're going to play in a Super Bowl. It's like,
which is crazy.
It doesn't happen that fast sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than to see that and take that next big stride. And I just think they're more inconsistent right now than anything else, where I'd love to bet them every single week. But you look at the AFC South right now, I'm like, I don't know how much better they are than the Colts or how much better they are than the Tennessee Titans. Or the Texans for that matter. It's a pretty tight division, and we didn't think that coming into it. We thought Jacksonville was going to walk away with it.
I think something to be said, too, is people tend to forget how they won games at the back of it last year. A lot of pick sixes, a lot of
we got lucky.
A lot of one-score games. And, Brady, we know this. That's not consistent, right? So, they were ahead of the curve last year, right? I think Tennessee having some injuries also helped them make that run to the playoffs. And, honestly, I've been pleasantly surprised by their defense this year. That was their weak spot last year. I think the way Josh Allen and that secondary is playing right now, it's become a real strength on that team. Let's not forget, they held the Chiefs low enough where they could have won that game.
Sure.
It was the offense that didn't show up in that game. So I've been surprised with their defense. I think you hit it right on the head. I don't think it's a cop-out. Which Jacksonville Jaguars team are we going to get week in and week out? Are you going to be consistent? Whether that's, them running the ball enough, the offensive line, interior offensive line. You pay Brandon Sheriff a lot of money. He struggled inside. They need to play better inside of that interior offensive line.
It's exactly like which Yeti product is Will Brinson going to pull out or use when he's gallivanting around his house.
Right. It varies based on what I'm consuming.
Yeah. Before we move on, just to Will and Harry, there's one team that we didn't put on here that I thought we should have put on here.
Who?
Oh, the Seahawks. Why didn't we put them on there? Oh. They only got one loss.
Okay.
I could get down with that.
I picked them as my sneaky team to go to the NFC Championship game.
Really?
Yeah. I can't wait till they play San Fran. That'll be a quote unquote litmus test.
I feel like
what's the Seahawks? What's the Seahawks?
They beat Detroit.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure what you point to.
It's health. They haven't had a starting five offensive line that they wanted to sit out there. They're two booked.
But that line is so much better than it used to be when Russell was there. It's hard to point to that for me.
And they've done a really good job of drafting guys taking the Bradford kid out of LSU and then Olu from Michigan.
Last year.
Played really well when they had to go into to play this year. So, I mean, once they get everybody back, hopefully after the bye, I think this is a team that can really take off.
I still worry about their pass rush. That was
really?
something. They come on late. They were not good early. That's something that you need to see more consistency for.
Well, you got to think they just got Jaden Reed back, Draymond Jones, who both of them played outstanding.
I mean, Jamal Adams, who's somehow
they do suck.
Jamal Adams
I like
somehow
that.
like a decent edge rusher from the safety position too. Like,
And that was the other thing. It's like if you're counting pressures from your secondary, it's like that's kind of to me like
Yeah, but
That's
I mean,
part of
it
the fatal
hasn't
flaw,
because he
yeah.
hasn't been there. Right?
like to me like linebackers. You know, you go in the secondary, they're good. It's
Yeah.
just early on they didn't show a lot of production. I know they've kind of been better of late, but again, you take Jamal Adams away from that.
I think that actually helps them, to be honest with you.
No, it does. But I'm saying
Yeah.
like, but I'm saying if you just rush their front four, which is like when they won the Super Bowl and back to back.
Yeah.
It was just a four-man rush.
Correct.
They weren't bringing additional pressure, safeties off edges all the time.
Yeah, I
It was
think
more of that.
I think Lieutenant Wilson, who played really well, and they gave him an extension. I think he's going to keep playing well at the end. Taylor's in a contract year; he's going to play well. I think this team, they had some freak injuries, like Devin Witherspoon was hurt in the beginning of the year. They still got to get everybody together, right? I think Kobe Bryant has been banged up. Once everybody gets healthy and they're coming off a bye, hopefully they get everybody back. I think this is a team that nobody's talking about that's going to be really dangerous.
I think this week 6 game with the Seahawks and the Bengals has the potential to be the whoa, what a crazy 1 o'clock finish game. Like that goes to overtime and like there's some zaniness at the end.
Where's
You
it
know what I
at?
mean?
Where's it at? Will, is it
In
Seattle?
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
Oh, that's gonna
It's in the nasty natty, is what they call it.
and if
Is
Joe
it
Burrow
is it what
back-
I always like forget, like I'm always like, oh, the weather, it's like 70 degrees and sunny here in North Carolina. I'm like, well, it can't be gross in Cincinnati. I'm like, oh no, it could be gross anytime in Cincinnati. Like,
I don't know how the
baby.
people in Cincinnati
That's
gonna
that
feel about
Ohio
that.
weather right there.